So welcome. Good evening. Today I'm so happy to see faces that I can recognize, followers that we have this evening. And of course we're doing English and Spanish. We had in our previous session, we had Carlos Salazar Herrera with a short story. And today we are going to continue with Edgar Allan Poe. He's obviously the master of Gothic fiction and psychological suspense. And so today we're going to delve into the mind, the mastermind. And as we said, we're going to do this with our friend and one of our students that was a student here at CCCN, Jack Sagot. And he's going to also combine his mastery in the art of musical composition with our reading. And yes, it's good to see young faces. It's good to see people that are coming. You are free to comment at any time. And today we're going to be reading The Cask of Amontillado, and we're going to be able to show it to you here. But you also can QR code and access the short story. And we're also going to be listening to The Raven. But now I'm going to let Jack Sagot come and talk to us about Edgar Allan Poe.
Muchas gracias, muchas gracias. Como camino tan lento, siempre llego después del aplauso. Entonces, termino haciendo las reverencias sin aplauso. Well, it's great to see you again, dear friends, and especially happy to see faces that I already saw a week ago. We will manage one way or another. We will do this in English. We'll do it also in Spanish. We will translate whenever it's necessary. We will adjust. We will improvise. Musicians are supposed to be good at improvisation, aren't we? At least in theory, in principle. But first, I mean, let's give music the first, isn't it? I mean, music should always be first. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. That's, as we all know, that's Luna Liberiana. This is by Don Jesus Bonilla. Great Costa Rican composer. Well, one of the greatest. And that's his most famous song. So, Luna Liberiana. Doesn't have much to do with Edgar Allan Poe, but we don't care. It's beautiful music. There was place for beautiful music. And we will hear something else later on. So we're going to embark on the Cask of Amontillado. That's one of Edgar Allan Poe's most popular stories. Edgar Allan Poe was a phenomenal storyteller. Last time I said it, for me, for my money, the best storytellers in the history of the world, there are not too many. To be sure, there are Edgar Allan Poe, yes, Guy de Maupassant, French, Anton Chekhov, Russian, Horacio Quiroga, Uruguayan, not Argentinian as many people believe, no, Uruguayan, and then Julio Cortázar, Carlos Salazar Herrera, Costa Rican. For my taste, those are the writers that better knew how to nail that difficult literary form that's tale, a short story. Edgar Allan Poe was a fantastic storyteller. Well, he was a great storyteller, a great poet, by the way, also, and also a very distinguished essay writer. He wrote some essays that have immense value. And but above all, Edgar Allan Poe was a sort of a speleologist of the human soul. He was a writer that had the courage to go deep down into those caverns, those sinister, lugubrious undergrounds of the human psyche, and expose the worst part of us, the worst part of the human being, everything that has to do with horror, with sinister things, with vengeance, with hatred, with all sorts of things, It was not easy. It was not easy to be a great writer while dealing with those subjects. It's something that required great courage, but he did it, and he did it beautifully. And we're going to see it in the Cask of Amontillado. So you have both versions in Spanish and in English. You can see by both books, none of them have cover page, which goes to tell you how much I love I love the stories. I have literally eroded. I have destroyed the cover pages. Doesn't happen except with a book that you read very much. The Cask of Amontillado. The Cask of Amontillado is a tale about revenge. That's what it is, a story about revenge. And stories about revenge tend to be very engaging. I don't know why. I suppose it doesn't speak very highly of us, the fact that revenge stories are so attractive to us. They engage us tremendously. It looks like we all here and everywhere have a few reasons for eventually taking revenge. Thanks God we don't take them because we are civilized and we have values. We have a lot of things that prevent us from taking revenge. But nevertheless, stories or movies or theater, that have to do with revenge usually excite us tremendously. And this is, par excellence, a story about revenge. Lilita, ¿me puedes pasar el chunchito del...? Gracias, corazón. Gracias mil. Gracias mil. Now, I won't reveal what the content of this thing is. It's some kind of energetic beverage that gives superpowers. Edgar Allan Poe was born in 1809. He died in 1849. He only lived 40 years. As we all know, he was alcoholic. He was addicted to opium, laudanum, and all sorts of dubious substances. And was born in Boston, and he died in Baltimore, where he is buried. As a matter of fact, for many, many decades, there was this sort of urban legend or tradition. Some unknown man dressed with a black cape, would walk into the cemetery in Baltimore, where Edgar Allan Poe is buried, and leave him in the middle of the night a bottle of whiskey with some beautiful white flowers. And he did it exactly on Edgar Allan Poe's birthday. For many decades. It hasn't been done recently, which makes me perhaps believe that the person who did it perhaps died. Perhaps nobody ever knew who was. But it wasn't whiskey. It was cognac and flowers. An unknown, mysterious guy walked in the middle of the cemetery on Edgar Allan Poe's birthday and left on his tomb. He left cognac with flowers. White flowers, to be precise, a symbol of purity, of chastity, of innocence. And nobody knew who that was. Unfortunately, it hasn't been happening lately. God knows what happened. Maybe the director of the cemetery decided not to allow any more unknown people to walk with cognac and flowers. I don't know. It was part of Edgar Allan Poe's mythology and legend. If I were rich, I would take a charter to Baltimore on every Edgar Allan Poe's birthday and leave him flowers and cognac, plenty for the whole year. But unfortunately, cannot. Anyways, the cask of Amontillado. The 1,000 injuries of Fortunato I had borne as best I could, but when he ventured upon insult, I vowed revenge. You, who so well know the nature of my soul, will not suppose, however, that I gave utterance to a threat. At length I would be avenged. This was a point definitely settled, but the very definitiveness with which it was resolved precluded the idea of risk. I must not only punish, but punish with impunity. A wrong is undressed when retribution overtakes its redresser. It is equally unredressed when the avenger fails to make himself felt as such to him who has done the wrong. In this passage, in this opening paragraph, it's very rich. It's very thoughtful. Edgar Allan Poe explains a sort of ethics of the revenge, or anti-ethics of the revenge, if you want. Number one, the revenge cannot be such that the guy who takes revenge is somehow hurt by his own revenge. He cannot be hurt. Otherwise, it would be pointless. It would be absurd. Second point, the victim of the revenge must have the time to realize who is taking the revenge and by what reason. He has to identify the revenger. You just cannot let a piano fall over his head from 10 stories high. No, the victim has to, oh my God, that guy, oh yeah, he's taking revenge for what I did to him. Yeah, you see, otherwise the revenge doesn't work. It has no condiment. It is sterile. So point one, the revenge should not affect the one who takes the revenge, the one who plans the revenge. Should never. Second, the victim must be somehow conscious at some point of the guy who's taking the revenge on him and the reason that moved him to take such a revenge. Two very important points. And now I proceed. We'll try not to interrupt, but I make no promises. It must be understood that neither by word nor deed had I given Fortunato cause to doubt my goodwill. I continued, as I was my wont, to smile in his face, and he did not perceive that the smile now was at the thought of his immolation. Immolation, sacrifice, He had a weak point, this Fortunato. Although, in other regards, he was a man to be respected and even feared. He prided himself on his connoisseurship in wine. Few Italians have the true virtuoso spirit. For the most part, their enthusiasm is adopted to suit the time and opportunity to practice imposture upon the British and Austrian millionaires. In painting and gemmary, Fortunato, like his countrymen, was a quack. But in the matter of old wines, he was sincere. In this respect, I did not differ from him materially. It was skillful in the Italian vintages myself. I was skillful in the Italian vintages myself and bought largely whenever I could. It was about dusk one evening during the supreme madness of the carnival season that I encountered my friend, quote unquote. Not much of a friend since he's planning to kill him, you know. There is tremendous amount of irony in this story. Tremendous. It's ironic from beginning to end. When do we have irony? We have irony when we make a statement, and that statement has 2 layers at least of meaning, you know? So if I give a concert and miss half of the notes and have memory slips and play awfully atrociously bad, I may ironically say, well, isn't it obvious that I am the best pianist in the world? You know, that would be an ironic reference. It has 2 layers of meaning. The literal meaning should be taken cum grano salis, with a grain of salt. You know, irony is a code. It's basically a code. You say one thing, meaning exactly the opposite. Well, isn't it obvious that I'm the best pianist on earth, missing 50% of the notes and forgetting the other half? So that's very important. That's very important in this story, the meaning of irony. Sarcasmo. Sarcasm, it's a subvariety of irony. It's not exactly the same, but yes, they're cousins. He accosted me with excessive warmth, for he had been drinking much. The man wore motley. He had on a tight-fitting party-strip dress, and his head was surmounted by the conical cap and bells. I was so pleased to see him that I thought I should never have done wringing his hand. I said to him, "My dear Fortunato, you are luckily met. How remarkably well you are looking today. But I have received a pipe of what passes for Amontillado, and I have my doubts." "How?" said he. "Amontillado? A pipe? Impossible." "And in the middle of the carnival?" "Well, as I said, I have my doubts," I replied, "and I was silly enough to pay the full Amontillado price without consulting you in the matter. You were not to be found, and I was fearful of losing a bargain." "Amontillado? Well, I have my doubts." "Amontillado? And I must satisfy them." "Amontillado? As you are engaged, I am on my way to Lucrezi. If anyone has critical turn in this, is he. He will tell me, Lucrezi cannot tell Amontillado from a sherry. Now look at the very, very evil way that the protagonist, who speaks in the first person, speaks as the omniscient narrator, you know. His name is Montrésor. The way he starts luring poor Fortunato, vain, proudful, bombastic Fortunato, lures him into going to his catacombs to verify if Montrésor had actually bought Amontillado or not. He takes him as a specialist, as a connoisseur, as a sommelier, and then he flatters him and he provokes him by saying, "Well, you don't have to bother going to my catacombs today. I mean, there is Lucrezi. He knows a lot about wines as well. He's as educated as you. He's as expert as you. Oh, Lucrezi is an ignorant. He could not distinguish Amontillado from Jerez. He's worth nothing." You know, he truly touches the most exposed nerves of Fortunato's narcissism and arrogance, you know, by confronting him to Lucrezi. He manipulates him, absolutely, you know. He's like a toy in his hands. Poor Fortunato falls victim of his pride and of his vanity, you know. Well, as you're engaged, I'm on my way to Lucrezi. If anyone has a critical turn, it is he. He will tell me, Lucrezi cannot tell Amontillado from Sherry. And yet some fools will have it that his taste is a match for your own, ¿verdad? Y sin embargo hay locos que creen que su gusto es tan refinado como el tuyo. ¡Qué locos!, ¿verdad? Atención, cómo lo está manejando, ¿verdad? Come, let us go. Whittler, to your vaults. My friend, no, I will not impose upon your good nature. I perceive you have an engagement. And Lucrezi, I have an engagement. Come. My friend, no, it is not the engagement, but the severe cold which I perceive you're afflicted. You know, the vaults are insufferably damp. They're encrusted with nitre. Oh, let us go. Nevertheless, the cold is merely nothing. Amontillado, you have been imposed upon. And as for Lucrezi, he can distinguish Sherry from Amontillado. Though speaking, Fortunato possessed himself of my arm and putting on mask of black silk and drawing a roquelaire closely about my person, I suffered him to hurry me to the palazzo. There were no attendants at home. They have absconded to make merry in honor of the time. I had told them that I should not return until the morning, and I had given them explicit orders not to stir from the house. These orders were sufficient, I well knew, to ensure their immediate disappearance, and all as soon as my back was turned. So he instructed the servants not to leave the palazzo, and he did it very, very cleverly, because he knew, you know, once the cat is not home, the rats, the mouse feast. You know, he knew that by issuing the instruction, do not leave my palazzo, as soon as he would turn his back on them, they would disband. They would run in absolute disband. So he used contrary psychology, you know, contrary psychology. You tell somebody, don't do this, knowing that he will do it, you know. I took from their sconces 2 flambeaux, 2 torches, and giving one to Fortunato, bowed him through several suites of rooms of the archway that led into the vaults. I passed down a long and winding staircase, requesting him to be cautious as he followed. We came at length to the foot of the descent and stood together upon the damp ground of the catacombs of the Mont Trésor. Remember, the character is a Mont Trésor. Okay. The gait of my friend wasn't steady, and the bells upon his cap jingled as he strode. The pipe, he said. Oh, it's farther on, said I. But observe the white webwork which gleams from the cavern walls. He turned towards me and looked into my eyes with 2 filmy orbs that distill the realm of intoxication. Nitrate? He asked at length. Nitre, I replied. How long have you had that cough? Nitre es salitre, que resuma de las partes interiores de la caverna, porque está debajo de un río, entonces la humedad se filtra. Salitre. Las catacumbas, exactly, yeah. How long have you had that cough? As if he was very interested and very worried about Fortunato's cough. He's not worried in the least about Fortunato. He doesn't give a damn. You know, he pretends to be very worried for his well-being, you know. My poor friend found it impossible to reply for many minutes. It is nothing, he said. It is nothing at last. Come, I said with decision, we will go back. Your health is precious. You're rich, respected, admired, beloved. You're happy as I once was. You're a man to be missed. For me, it's no matter. We will go back. You will be ill, and I cannot be responsible. Besides, there is Lucrezi. Enough, he said. The cough is a mere nothing. It will not kill me. It will not kill me. I shall not die of a simple cough. True, true, I replied. And indeed, I had no intention of alarming you unnecessarily, but you should use all proper caution. A draught of this Medoc will defend us from the damps. Medoc is a kind of wine. It's a brand of wine. Here I knocked off the neck of the bottle, which I drew from a long row of its fellows that lay upon the mold. Drink, I said, presenting him the wine. He raised it up to his lips with a leer. He paused and nodded to me familiarly, while his bells jingled. His bells jingle, 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 because he was a buffon. Fortunato was disguised as a buffon and had, that little hat with jingles. And he was dressed as a buffon with strips and all sorts of things. That's another irony. I mean, this poor buffon, in principle, the embodiment of merriment, of gaiety, of happiness, of a carnival. We're in the middle of a carnival, it's obvious, everybody's disguised. This buffon is going to be the most tragic buffon ever, What he's going to have to endure is certainly no matter for laughter whatsoever. Drink, I said, presenting him the wine. He raised it to his lips with a leer. He paused and nodded up to me familiarly with his bells jingle. I drink, he said, to the buried that reposed around me. Premonitory. I drink to the health of those who are buried around me. Very ironic again, very ironic. He could not care less about the people who are there, buried in the catacombs. And besides, he's already in a way drinking for himself, drinking on his own honor, on his own memory. It's very interesting. This is what you would call a flash forward. In movies, a flash forward. You have a flashback. In literature, it's called racconto, the raconte, a flashback. In the middle of a movie, you go back to the youth or to the childhood of the protagonist, and you see something that's very important, that's very pertinent to understand his behavior, or a flash forward. You go into the future and you see a scene when the protagonist is older, and then you already know what's going to happen. Now, it remains to be seen how it came to that to happen, So this is a kind of a flash forward, Montresor could not be more perverse. My God. And I drink to your long life. Now, look at this, Montresor. And I drink to your long life, to the honor of your long life, wishing for you a long life. What an actor. What a despicable creature, there is so much evil in this story, And I drink to your long life. He again took my arm and we proceeded. These vaults, he said, are extensive. Oh, the Montresors, I replied, were a great and numerous family. I forget your arms, su blasón, su escudo de armas. Well, it's a huge human foot d'or in a field azure. The foot crushes a serpent rampant whose fangs are embedded in the heel. El escudo de armas se veía un talón apretando una serpiente, pero en tanto que la serpiente era estripada, le hundía los colmillos en el talón de quien la estaba matando. Ese era el escudo de armas de los Montresor. And the motto, el motto es el lema. Nemo me impune lacessit. Nadie queda impune. No dejaré a nadie impune. This is el motto. Good, he said, approving. Poor idiot. The wine sparkled in his eyes and the bells jingled. My own fancy grew warm with the Medoc. We had passed through long walls of piled skeletons with casks and puncheons intermingling into the inmost recess of the catacombs. I paused again, and this time I made bold to seize Fortunato by an arm above the elbow. The nitrate, I said. See, it increases. It hangs like moss upon the vaults. We are below the river's bed. The drop of moisture trickle among the bones. Come, we will go back here. It's too late. Before it's too late, we'll go back. Yeah, your cough. It is nothing, he said. Let us go on. But first, another draught of the Medoc. I broke and reached him a flagon of de grave, another kind of wine. He emptied it at a breath. Se vació toda en un solo corcor, se vació todo el vino. His eyes flashed with a fierce light. He laughed and threw the bottle upwards with a gesticulation I did not understand. I looked at him in surprise. He repeated the movement, a grotesque one. You do not comprehend? He said. Not I replied. Then you are not of the Brotherhood. How? You are not of the Masons. Yes, I said, yes. Though, impossible. Impossible, you, a Mason? No, that's impossible. I am a Mason, I replied. Well, give me a sign. A sign. It is this. I answered, producing from beneath the folds of my roquelaire a trowel. Lo que, claro, entra el tema de la masonería, que tiene su importancia, ¿verdad? Porque Fortunato, pretendiendo saber más de Montresor, de lo que él mismo sabe, le insiste en que él es masón, ¿verdad? Y insiste en que él es masón. Entonces, Fortunato, bueno, Montresor más bien para probarlo saca una espátula. La espátula es un símbolo masónico. Las espátulas se usan para aplanar, alisar superficies de cemento, de concreto, que no queden asperezas. Por eso es un símbolo de la amistad. La espátula es un símbolo de amistad porque lima asperezas, uniforma, alisa las superficies. Otra ironía, porque esta no es una historia de amistad en lo absoluto, ¿verdad? So, you jest, he exclaimed, recoiling a few paces, but let us proceed to the Amontillado. Be it so, I said, replacing the tool beneath the cloak and again offering him my arm. He leaned upon it heavily. We continued our route in search of the Amontillado. We passed through a range of low arches, descended, passed on, and descending again, arrived at a deep crypt in which the foulness of the air caused our flambeaux rather to glow than to flame. Ya la luz de los flambeaux era casi como un fantasma, ¿verdad? Ya no se veía la llama, sino apenas un vago resplandor. Atención, que se van metiendo en criptas cada vez más pequeñas. One crypt contains another crypt, that contains another crypt, contains another vault, that contains another catacomb, that contains another vault. They are just walking in four, they're just passing through. Claustrophobic. My God, I get claustrophobia just by reading these. First time in my life I read this, I have to confess, I started feeling, I had respiration problems. I could not breathe properly. I had to go to the refrigerator and take a good glass of very cold water and drank it, just like Fortunato drank his Medoc, like that. Because, they keep going into that descent into hell, that Dante's light, like descent into hell. Going into spaces more and more constrictive, darker and darker, more and more claustrophobic, more and smaller and smaller. It's tremendous. At the most remote of the crypt, there appeared another less spacious. Its walls had been lined with human remains, piled to the vault overhead in the fashion of the great catacombs of Paris. 3 sides of this interior crypt were still ornamented in this manner. From the 4th side, the bones had been thrown down and lay promiscuously upon the earth, forming at one point a mound of some size. Within the wall, thus exposed by the displacing of the bones, we perceived a width there we perceive a still interior crypt or recess in depth about 4 feet, in width 3, in height 6 or 7. Una última bóveda, ¿verdad? Una última bóveda. Y ahora, imagínense la verdad, más o menos en profundidad unos 4 pies, en ancho unos 4 pies, en alto, y en ancho unos 8 a 7 pies. Es prácticamente casi un ataúd, ¿verdad? It seemed to have been constructed for no special use within itself, but formed merely the interval between two of the colossal supports of the roof of the catacombs, and was backed by one of their circumscribing walls of solid granite. It was in vain that Fortunato, uplifting his dull torch, endeavored to pry into the depth of the recess. Its termination, the feeble light did not enable us to see. Proceed, I said. Proceed. Herein is the Amontillado. As for Lucrezi, he is an ignoramus, interrupted my friend. He stepped unsteadily forward, while I followed immediately at his heels. In an instant, he had reached the extremity of the niche, and, finding the progress arrested by the rock, stood stupidly bewildered. A moment more, and I had fettered him to the granite. In his surface were two iron staples distant from each other about 2 feet horizontally. For one of these depended a short chain, from the other a padlock. Throwing the links about his waist, it was but a work of a few seconds to secure it. He was too much astounded to resist. Withdrawing the key, I stepped back from the recess. En una fracción de segundo lo metió en ese último nicho, que ya no tenía continuación. Le pasó una cadena, le puso un candado, lo amarró, lo dejó ahí. El otro estaba demasiado borracho, y además demasiado turulato, no supo qué pasaba, no supo reaccionar, y cuando se vio estaba ya encadenado al último nicho, en el último rincón más profundo de aquellas descomunales catacumbas. Igual de solo estaría en otro planeta. Era como si estuviera en otro planeta. Aislamiento total, ¿verdad? Y silencio total. Pass your hand, I said, over the wall. You cannot help feeling the nitre. Indeed, it's very damp. Once more, let me implore you to return. No? Then I must positively leave you. But I must first render you all the little attention in my power. See how evil, you know? Please, I still implore you to return. Well, he can no longer return. He's chained to the crypt, you know? And still, ironically, cruelly, perversely, I still implore you to return. You should consider to return. Touch the walls. There's the salitre. There's the nitre. Touch this. Very, very damp. It's very, very humid. Now, all that, again, is an enormous exercise in irony. That's what it is, you know. He's pretending to be concerned for his enemy's health. The Amontillado, ejaculated my friend. Interesting use of the verb. Ejaculated my friend. En español uno diría, y eyaculó, ¿verdad? El público en el estadio, después de la caída del gol, eyaculó el grito de gol. Uno no eyacula, uno grita. Pero es muy lindo en el inglés. Porque una vociferación así es tan automática, ciega, fisiológica y primaria, tan visceral como una eyaculación. No es prácticamente un grito, no está razonado, es una cosa que sale volcánica explosivamente. The Amontillado, ejaculated my friend, not yet recovered from his astonishment. True, I replied, yeah, the Amontillado. As I said these words, I busied myself among the pile of bones of which I had before spoken. Throwing them aside, I soon uncovered a quantity of building stone and mortar. With these materials and with the aid of my trowel, I began vigorously to wall up the entrance of the niche. I had scarcely laid the first tire of the masonry when I discovered that the intoxication of Fortunato had in a great measure worn off. The earliest indication I had of this was a long moaning cry from the depth of the recess. It was not the cry of a drunken man. There was then a long and obstinate silence. I lit the second tire, and the third, and the fourth, and then I heard the furious vibration of the chain. The noise lasted for several minutes, during which, that I might hearken to it with more satisfaction, I ceased my labors and sat down upon the bones. So he suspended the building up of the tires, you know, emparedarlo, y se sentó un momentito sobre la pila de huesos que ocultaban el mortero y todo lo demás. Se sentó a escuchar como quien oye música, Como quien oye una melodía hermosa, se intenta escuchar los alaridos furibundos y los jalonazos de cadena del encadenado Fortunato. Y aquí vemos, no es Fortunato, es infortunato. He's anything but Fortunato. He's tremendously unfortunate. But look at this. I mean, let's savor this. This is a story about evil. We have to be able to savor evil. I mean, as long as we do it vicariously, par interposita mano, through somebody else. I'm not encouraging any of you guys to hate or to savor evil. I mean, I would be perverting you. It would be despicable, morally speaking. But we can savor the perversity in a book, in a fictional story, you know. So he sits down on the pile of bones, just like that, to listen to Fortunato's desperate struggle with the chains in the bottom of the crypt, you know, just like as if it was the most beautiful music ever. The noise lasted for several minutes, during which, that I might hearken to it with the more satisfaction, I ceased my labors and sat down upon the bones. When at last the clanking subsided, I resumed the trowel and finished without interruption the fifth, the sixth, and the seventh tire, la línea de ladrillos. The wall was now nearly upon a level with my breast. I again paused, and holding the flambeau over the mason work, threw a few feeble rays upon the figure within. Now, here, the whole, and Poe was a mason, by the way. It's important to mention that. He was a notorious franc-maçon, notorious mason, in a time where being a mason was perceived as a rather satanical. Masons were persecuted, you know, all over the place. So here we have the mason, albañil element, you know, because Montresor is very skillful in albañilería, en poner los filitas de ladrillos con el mortero, ¿verdad? Todo, eso no lo haría yo, no sabía cómo. Es muy simple, pero yo soy muy inútil. Pero aquí emerge el Montresor albañil, the mason. A succession of loud and shrill screams. What beautiful the use of words. A succession of loud and shrill with I, shrill screams. It's like yeah, exactly. It's la música de Bernard Herrmann's masterful music for Psycho. Hitchcock in 1960, the movie from 1960. You know that Psycho, so that you realize what the level of censorship was. Psycho is from 1960. It's the first movie in the history of cinema where a toilet is shown. A toilet was considered to be something obscene, against morals, indecent, opprobrious. When Norman Bates destroys the letter of Marion Crane, that's Janet Leigh, who performs her, and throws the pieces of paper in the toilet and pulls the chain of the toilet, and then you see the paper going on. It was the first time in the history of cinema that somebody dared to show a toilet. And that's 1960. That's 2 years before I was born. I'm perplexed to know that. So, but here Poe is using sonorities with a wonderful criteria. You know, a succession of loud and shrill screams. The I, shrill screams. Suena puntiagudo. La I siempre suena puntiaguda. I remember I had the honor of being Don Joaquín Gutiérrez, the author of Cocorí and Muramos Federico Puerto León, wonderful stuff. I had the honor of being his student for one semester, for 1 semester, 2 semesters in Costa Rica. And Don Joaquin Gutierrez had been translating from the English into Spanish King Lear, Macbeth, Hamlet by Shakespeare. He's one of the greatest translators of English into Spanish, and I had the honor to be his student. And he always complained to me desperately. He said, I don't know what to do. I mean, here Macbeth is supposed to kill, but the I, la I, kill, es una sonoridad punzocortante, es una daga, I. Incluso en la gráfica de I es como una espina, es punzocortante. Pero lo que el español me ofrece es matar. Matar es una palabra roma, it has no point. It's not sharp. How can I use matar when Shakespeare had at his disposal to kill? Asesinar? No, that's horrendous. It ends in ar as well. Herir? No, because he doesn't get it. He actually kills him. Not just that he hurts him. He kills him effectively. Well, I don't know what to say, Don Joaquin. I'm going to try to think about something. I'm going to look in all synonym dictionaries in the world to see if I can give you a hand with that. I didn't came with any possibility. And it's not possible. That's one of the reasons the Raven, poetical masterpiece of Edgar Allan Poe, could never be translated to French. People who knew something about poetry, Charles Baudelaire, Stéphane Mallarmé, Paul Verlaine, great first-class poets, all failed in proposing a good translation to French of The Raven, because you don't have in French is a wonderful language, has many beautiful things that English doesn't have, but it happens that French doesn't have a word equivalent to nevermore. Quoth the Raven, nevermore. That sonority, that cavernous, that obscure, dark, deep, nevermore. Quoth the Raven, nevermore. For the lost Lenore, nevermore. What could the French come with? Well, the best they could do, and yes, you're allowed to laugh, jamais plus. Et le corbeau a dit, jamais plus. That has no resonance, that has no symphonic color, that has no depth, it has to be a certain concavous quality to nevermore, jamais plus. Impossible. We are talking the best French poets of all time. They all stumble upon the same block. They all hit the same, the same wall, And then, et le corbeau a dit, jamais plus. Come on, something.
What about to draw? Instead of saving the word, like making a paint or something?
Well, that would be a solution, but we end up with a hybrid language that's half verbal, half linguistic, and then half pictorial, which, by the way, can be done and has been done. Guillaume Apollinaire wrote his famous calligramme, where every verse is a line in a general dessin, in a drawing. You have poems that represent a fountain. You have poems that represent a man with a hat. You have a poem that represents the Tour Eiffel. You have a poem that represents the female sex. I mean, Apollinaire did all sorts of things. So you can do that. Closer to us, Octavio Paz, the great Mexican writer, Nobel Prize winner, he wrote his famous topoemas, topo from topo, like topography. Topoemas, so where he used signs that were more drawings than letters, like Chinese hieroglyphicos, a hybrid in between drawing and writing. So you can do that, but Poe wouldn't have done it. I mean, it would be kind of anachronism, wouldn't it? because all those experiments come from the 20th century. But you're right. That's a very intelligent suggestion. So a succession of loud and shrill screams bursting. What a nice word. Bursting. B, an explosive, labial, lip, bursting. You cannot, any other verb would have been weak. Bursting, which gives you the impression of boom, boom, something that explodes. And this is important to mention because Poe was a poet. So he had a very acute eye. He had a very acute faculty of listening to things, He knew very well what sonorities to convoke in every particular circumstance. Very careful. He was maniacally careful about choosing the right words with the right phonemes and the right sonorities. He proves it in The Raven, for instance, for Baudelaire and Mallarmé's despair, Yes, dale.
¿Cómo podría ser el proceso que utilizó Poe para escribir? Como imaginándose todo el contexto, la semántica, me imagino que duraba mucho tiempo.
No, escribía rápido.
O sea, la forma como pensaba y como se imaginaba la historia.
Este cuento, te puedo decir, este cuento fue una pesadilla. Fue una pesadilla de él, y él lo describió. El casco de Amontillado was a nightmare. All I had to do was, as soon as I woke up, I went immediately to the table, and before the nightmare, diluted itself, before it vanished, cuidadosamente corrió, lo escribí, no dije lo escribí, lo eché, lo vomité en media hora. Lo dejé escrito en media hora. Fue casi escritura automática, compañero. Tener razón, en general, cuentos como estos requieren enormes cantidades de tiempo, revisiones, trabajo, etcétera, etcétera. Tener razón, tu suposición es correcta. No, porque tenemos que darle crédito al subconsciente. The subconscious mind is as creative as the conscious mind, if not more. Actually, most of the magma, most of the lava that comes from the depths of our soul, in the form of dreams, in the oniric way, is tremendously powerful and tremendously true. And it's lived as reality. I mean, when one is having a nightmare, one lives the suffering and the anguish of the nightmare. So he had a nightmare, he woke up, he went immediately, he jumped onto the table and wrote it down before the details would vanish, see. So, a mí me pasan montones de pesadillas todas las noches, casi por desgracia, pero no se traducen en cuentos. Although I have written some stories that actually, no kidding, I have written stories that were originated by dreams. That experience I have had, that's not alien to me. I have lived that, but never wrote anything comparable to the Casco de Amontillado, needless to say.
Ray Bradbury es uno que decía que muchas de sus historias se basan en pesadillas de niño.
The authors are also so with a big imagination that they are so creative, like the girl that made Harry Potter. It's a universe that is so big and crazy. All these authors are so creative and they have a big imagination.
Yes. This little friend should be imparting the course. It's beautiful. Repeat me your name.
My name is Jimena.
Jimena. Lindo nombre. Era la amada del Cid Campeador, don Rodrigo Díaz de Vivar. Algún día vas a saber de eso. El Cid Campeador, un héroe de las novelas de la Edad Media en España. Su novia se llamaba Jimena. Well, sure, Edgar Poe had a tremendous imagination, of course. No writer can be short on imagination. A writer without an imagination is like a musician who cannot write a tune, you know. We do need imagination, to be sure. But it's very important to understand, Jimena, that the visions, these awful, oppressive, dark visions that Poe encapsulated and put into paper, you know, those visions came from his subconscious mind, from that sort of, I don't want to even imagine what was in that reservoir, awful reservoir of tremendous visions. All the prime matter of this tale came from the dreams, came from dreamland. You know, and then, of course, it was with and from the subconscious mind, this conscious mind, that he wrote it, taking care to the comma, period, etc., blah, 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 the figures of speech, the rhetorical aspects, the stylistic aspects, all that was conscious labor. But the visions, you know, the movie, so to speak, the movie that was presented to him in his dreams, it was his subconscious mind. Es que no lo leyó, amiguita, lo que hizo fue trasladarlo. Él no se cuestionó, esto es lo bello de estos cuentos. Él no se cuestionó qué significaba esto. Eso estamos haciendo nosotros ahora, hacer el exégesis, el análisis. ¿Qué significa esto? ¿Qué significa la espátula? ¿Por qué masón? Claro, porque iba a empalar al otro, a amurallarlo, entonces tenía que ser masón. ¿Ves? Eso es el trabajo del lector. El análisis es el trabajo del lector, pero la plasmación de las imágenes es el trabajo del autor. Y finalmente la experiencia de lectura es una experiencia a deux, entre dos. Necesitamos lectores muy buenos como ustedes, porque son lectores muy buenos y estoy feliz de verlos aquí. Y necesitamos un gran escritor. Entonces es una candela que se quema por los dos extremos y el fuego avanza y se encuentra en la mitad. Shakespeare con malos lectores no sirve para nada. Un mal escritor con lectores geniales no sirve para nada. Necesitamos escritores geniales con lectores geniales. A ver, no geniales, proactivos, lectores co-creadores, co-creators of meaning. And then we have that encounter, that magic encounter, and you have the sparks, and you have that wonderful experience, the aesthetic experience. But you need to be an active reader, a co-creative reader, because in a great measure, the sense, the meaning of the text is you who are putting in. You're putting your meaning. In fact, this is so true that lots of readers can diverge insofar as what the meaning of the text is. You have different interpretations, different readings, different analysis, you know, because all of us we're different persons. So our input into the text is different. So the experience of reading, la experiencia de lectura es un romance muy íntimo entre el escritor y el lector. Necesitamos un lector de gran categoría, porque es literatura de gran categoría. Alguien que solo ha leído en su vida Corín Tellado no va a poder entender este cuento, no le va a hacer nada de gracia. Corín Tellado was a writer of Mexican, very syrupy, very adulterated, very corny, passional novels. My grandmother used to read Corín Tellado fervently. So, en Vanidades. Siempre salía novela inédita de Corín Tellado. Bueno, pues si ya está edita, puesto que está escrita, ya no es inédita. What are you talking about? So that was the hook, Inedit, new, unknown, trivial, inedit, new novel by Corín Tellado, that wonderful explorer human passions. It was so corny, so horrible. I made the sacrifice of reading one once, I was totally disappointed. And of course, it's awful literature. is grade Z literature. Only my poor grandmommy, she used to read that. I mean, I don't mean to insult her. He also read good things, but he was very aficionada a Corintellado.
Una cosa interesante, a pesar de él haber diseñado mucho con sueños de su infancia, genera mucho conocimiento en estudio, porque están rituales, símbolos masónicos, los temas de los huesos, los sonidos, refleja mucho esa profundidad de estudio de rituales y también el contacto del ser con la muerte. Llama la atención esa forma y profundidad de escribir. Un poco en la parte emocional y demás, pero también de conocimiento.
Claro.
Y de todo su bagaje interior.
Claro. Edgar Allan Poe put all of his soul in these stories. He put himself in his literature, like few writers have done. Everything he wrote is more or less autobiographical, somehow. From close or from the distance, everything he wrote is autobiographical. So,
Es impresionante, o sea, no sé, usted que menciona de los sueños y todo esto, yo leí un poquito de Freud y cómo él exploraba el mundo onírico y cómo se conectaba la realidad y el onírico y cómo todo iba interconectado. O sea, eso a mí me llamó demasiado la atención, el de que, o sea, todo lo que pensamos que no conocemos o que lo estamos inventando en realidad no es que lo estamos inventando como tal, sino que lo estamos reformulando. Eso que mencionó el compañero ahorita me llamó la atención, o sea, es decir, de que esta persona era muy inteligente o muy estudiosa para saber cosas sobre la Amazonía y sobre todo esto. Entonces es demasiado llamativo, o sea, eso fue algo de lo que más me llamó la atención.
Pero no hemos terminado. Seguimos. At the most remote end of the crypt, there appeared another less spacious. Its walls had been... I read that already. Oh, yeah, I was mistaken by like 100 pages. A succession of loud and shrill screams bursting suddenly from the throat of the chain form. It's no longer Fortunato, it's just a chain form, seemed to thrust me violently back. I mean, the force of the screams almost threw him back. It was like an expansive wave, like a tsunami, like an oral tsunami. For a brief moment, I hesitated. I trembled. Unsheathing my rapier, I began to grope with it about the recess, but the thought of an instant reassured me. I placed my hand upon the solid fabric of the catacombs and felt satisfied. Ese momento de duda, donde yo oí esos gritos espantosos que salían de la entraña de Fortunato, lo hacen vacilar. Pero entonces se apoya en las catacumbas como para sentir algo sólido. Just to feel something solid, that kind of have the feeling that he's sustained by some kind of pillar, because the situation is so extreme, so nightmarish that even him vacillates, even him hesitates in that moment. I reapproached the wall. I replied to the yells of him with clamor. I re-echoed. I aided. I surpassed them in volume and in strength. I did this, and the clamor grew still. Desde afuera de la tumba, Montresor le respondía a los gritos. El viejo encerrado gritando, y Montresor en competencia gritando más duro que él todavía, shouting even louder. I mean, what couple of loonies, aren't they? What awful, can you imagine such schizophrenia? Two men alone in the never discovered before depths of a catacomb dating many centuries back. I mean, going into that competition of yelling at each other, Es como que Montresor no quiere darle ni siquiera a Fortunato el triunfo de que grite más que él. Estás gritando, pedazo de hijo, de lo que ya sabemos. Yo grito más todavía. Y le grita desde afuera. Es otro tipo de grito, ¿verdad? Pero es gritos terribles. So, I did this, and the clamorer grew still. Al verse superado en los gritos, Fortunato se calmó. It was now midnight, and my task was drawing to a close. I had completed the 8th, the 9th, and the 10th tire. I had finished a portion of the last and the 11th. There remained but a single stone to be fitted and plastered in. I struggled with its weight. I placed it partially in its destined position. But now there came from out the niche a loud laugh that erected the hairs upon my head. It was succeeded by a sad voice, which I had difficulty in recognizing as that of the noble Fortunato. The voice said, a very good joke indeed, an excellent jest. We will have many a rich laugh about it at the palazzo over our wine. The Amontillado, I said. yes, the Amontillado. But Fortunato, is it, Montresor, is it not getting late? Is it not getting late? Will not they be awaiting us at the palazzo? The Lady Fortunato and the rest? Let us be gone. Fortunato en su infortunio se imagina que es una broma. Por último, pero nos están esperando en el palacio. Lady Fortunato, la pobre esposa, evoca a su esposa. Entiendan estos amigos. Él va a quedar como un desaparecido. Nadie va a saber si se ahogó, lo mataron, si se murió, si se fue de viaje a la Patagonia. Nadie va a saber más de Fortunato. Nadie va a investigar las catacumbas de Montresor. Va a evanecer. He's going to disappear in the thin air. You know, it's a terrible form of death. I mean, his wife is going to be there waiting for him forever. And his friends. So he imagines that there may be a joke. We're going to laugh so much about all this once we're back in the palazzo, you know. This is going to be a tremendous joke. He tries to take it humoristically, you know. Will not be awaiting us in the palazzo, Lady Fortunato and the rest. Let us be gone. Yes, I said. Let us be gone. For the love of God, Montresor. Yes, I said, for the love of God. But to these words I hearkened in vain for a reply. I grew impatient. I called aloud, Fortunato. No answer. I called again, Fortunato. No answer still. I thrust a torch through the remaining aperture and let it fall within. There came forth in a return only a jingling of the bells. My heart grew sick. It was the dampness of the catacombs that made it so. I hastened to make end of my labor. I forced the last stone into its position. I plastered it up. Against the new masonry, I re-erected the old rampart of bones. For the half of a century, no mortal has disturbed them. In pace requiescat. Which is a Latin expression, means descansa en paz, rest in peace, in pace requiescat. So he finishes with a Latin quotation. So all he hears at the end is the jingling of the bells of Fortunato's hat, you know. It's terrible. It's terrible. Again, talk about masonry. And then once the masonry was complete and Fortunato was completely buried alive in chains, he reaccommodated the pile of bones, just as they were before, to hide the wall and to hide all the masonry work, you know, all the things. Now, put yourself in the place of Fortunato. He's coming out from being drunk, majorly drunk. So he's going to experience a tremendous thirst. He's going to have nothing to calm that thirst. He's going to find himself chained. He's going to find himself in absolute darkness, absolute and complete darkness, in the smallest and most oppressive little niche of the huge catacombs, many floors below the surface. He's going to miss his wife. He's going to pray. He's going to yell. He's going to cry with all certainty. He's going to last at least a day before the air runs out. He dies from hypoxia, from lack of oxygen. It's a tremendously cruel death. I mean, it could not have been crueler. It's tremendous, you know, as could only have come out from from the mind of some sadistic creature, you know. Poor Fortunato. I mean, one can only wonder what kind of insult did Fortunato preferred for Montresor to take such a radical vengeance. Because he says at the beginning of that's the way it starts, the 1,000 injuries of Fortunato I had borne as I best could. So Fortunato had a history of abusing Montresor. He had a history, but Montresor had more or less tolerated them, let them pass, you know. But when he ventured upon insult, I vowed revenge. I mean, Fortunato reached the limit of Montresor's patience, you know. So again, this is it's tremendous. It's tremendously perverse. So how did you like this wonderful story? Poe died alcoholic in Baltimore. Nobody knows what he was doing in Baltimore. He had been, he lost both father and mother at a very early age. He was the son of nomadic actors, small actors. I'm not talking Laurence Olivier and Vivian Leigh. Small little actors who went around in a car offering little, in between circus, in between saltimbanquis, you know, in between circus and acting, you know. He lost both parents. He was educated by a rich plantation owner in the South of the United States. He heard all the macabre stories that the African Americans, slaves, used to tell each other to entertain themselves during the moonlight plantation nights, you know. And so he drank from all that rich treasure of legends and stories. That's one important influence on him. And then he was the first American writer who actually could make a living, although less than modest, just by writing, you know. And he was in Baltimore. There were some elections going on in Baltimore, governor or whatever you want, congressman. So the vote hunters had this horrendous practice. They would take some guy from the street, some pobre diablo, don nadie, mal vestido, borrachín, lo emborrachaban más, lo llevaban a las urnas y lo ponían a votar cientos, miles de veces por la misma papeleta del candidato que ellos querían que ganara. Se cree, it is believed that Poe died victim of this scheme, of this awful thing. He was left in the street to die like a dog. He was picked up by somebody. Nobody knew who he was. He agonized in the hospital for a couple of weeks, never came out of the alcoholic or the ethylene coma. He was in a deep coma, an alcoholic coma, induced by these two guys, you know. And he did recover consciousness like 3 seconds before dying, and all he said was, Padre, Padre, apiádate de este pobre miserable. And that's his last word. Father, Father, take pity on this poor, miserable soul. Those were his last words. And then he passed away, and he was buried in Baltimore. And there's where I have gone to visit, although I never brought cognac and flowers to him. But I will, you know. I love him. He's one of the writers in my life. So, you have, ¿qué me quería decir?
I want to say, like, some things. Number one is, one of the worst nightmare, post-nightmare, it was to be buried alive. So that's why sort of stories have this thing. One of his worst nightmare was buried alive. Next thing is, I was thinking about the name Montresor and the name of the most famous vengeance, Monte Cristo.
Well, sure.
So maybe, you know...
Nice. Nicely observed. Nicely observed, because El Conde de Montecristo is an enormous saga about revenge. Or justice. Justice. You could see it as justice. The returning Montresor who comes back practically from death, you know, in the Chateau d'If, where he had been recluded, and almost died and perished and had the most awful time. He comes like sort of an angel of vengeance and starts to torture and destroy all the enemies that had conspirated against him. So Monte Cristo and Montresor is very nicely observed, but we have a little problem, and I cannot elucidate it right now. I don't know if Monte Cristo was before Poe or after Poe. Poe died in 1849, and this story is at least 10 years before, 1839. I don't know if Poe would have had access to Le Comte de Monte Cristo. I don't know. I will check. Your observation is very, very pertinent, but I cannot endorse it because we have date problems,
And the last thing that I want to say is that Paul dies in mystery too, not just because he's dead, just because his head just vanished. His corpse had no weight.
Yeah.
So nobody knows where is that Paul's head. So it's mystery.
Yeah. Well, the horror that you evoke, the horror of horrors, because it is a psychosis, many people suffer from that, I assure you, to be buried alive. Well, Edgar Allan Poe has a story that's precisely called Buried Alive, So he suffered from that ghost, buried alive. Plus, he has a story, the Fall of the House of Usher, where Madeline Usher is buried alive. Plus, he has another story called Berenice, where Berenice is buried alive. Plus, he has another story called Ligeia, where Ligeia is buried alive. Plus, he has another story called Morella, where Morella is buried alive. So, no question that this was an obsession to him. Tremendous. But it is to many people. Chopin, the great the great Polish composer, when he was in his deathbed, agonizing, he left a little, it's very moving because it's a letter, and you can see the lines, they all fall down. They are falling down, like melting. He could not almost hold the pencil anymore. And he says, puisque cette toux finira par m'étouffer, je vous conjure à faire ouvrir mon corps et sortir mon cœur afin que je ne sois pas enterré vivant. Since this cough is going to end up by suffocating me, I conjure you, I exhort you to open my body and take out my heart so that I'm not buried alive. And they did it. They took his heart and they buried it in a beautiful cathedral in Varsovia, in Poland. He was Pole, Chopin. So you're talking about, obviously it is a haunting thing for Edgar Allan Poe, the thing of the premature burial. No question. You're touching one of the leitmotifs, one of the most recurring things in Poe's stories, and also in his poems, by the way. So thank you. ¿Qué dice Jimenita?
I think it is a good way to talk about. I'm thinking too that, I'm going to say it in Spanish, lo que usted dice del subconsciente me parece muy interesante. Y me parece también que sus historias eran una forma como de representar, o más bien que siempre estuvo presente, el que él siempre estuvo rodeado de muerte y tuvo una infancia y una vida bastante trágica. Se le murió la esposa de tuberculosis.
¿Cierto?
Los papás se murieron, quedó huérfano y nunca se terminó de llevarse bien. De hecho, por eso agregó el Alan, creo que me habían dicho mis papás, que él originalmente se llamaba Edgar Poe.
That's correct.
Pero por la...
Alan es de la segunda familia,
Sí.
que nunca lo adoptó.
De Francis Allan. Francis Allan, que fue el dueño de la plantación de algodón, fue el papá adoptivo, Francis Allan. Pero
nunca terminaron de llevarse
se llevaron pésimo él y los papás adoptivos. Entonces, tenés razón. En rigor, para ser justos, deberíamos llamarlo Edgar Poe. Deberíamos quitarle el Allan. Él no se hubiera sentido orgulloso del Allan, porque detestaba al viejo Allan, que fue su padrastro. Él no lo usaba. Y creo que flaco favor le hacemos en ponerle el Allan. Pero ¿quién va a estas alturas a quitarle el Allan? ¿Verdad? No, es imposible. Edgar Poe, no, Edgar Allan Poe, es que forma parte de la sonoridad, de la melodía. Edgar Allan Poe, you cannot take the Allan anymore, you know, because... Pero está muy bien, sí, claro, sus cuentos son una forma de conjurar esos fantasmas de tanta muerte que tuvo en su vida. And you're right, Jimena, he did marry a very young woman. She was his cousin, Virginia Clem. Indeed, Virginia Clem was 13 years old when he married Edgar Allan Poe. He was 26 and Virginia 13. By that time, las costumbres de la época se podía, no era mal visto. Ya por encima de 12, una vez que una niña estaba ya en época núbil, fértil, se consideraba casadera. Se casó con su prima, Virginia Clem, a los 13 años, él tenía 26, pero ya no le duró casi nada, se le murió de tuberculosis, lo que le signó por una herida. Le dolió, pero como no hay palabras. De ahí salieron todos sus poemas dedicados a mujeres muertas. De ahí sale The Raven, porque en el Raven hay un hombre solitario que está invocando a The Lost Lenore, la perdida Leonora, que era su amada, muerta. Y lo único que recibe es este cuervo en medio de la tempestad que entra en el cuarto revoloteando, se para sobre un busto de Palas, del dios griego Palas, un busto blanco, mármol blanco con el cuervo negro, ojo al contraste. Qué curioso, ¿verdad? Muy de pesadilla también. No sé si The Raven fue concebido como una pesadilla, pero as well it could have, because it has all the elements of a nightmare. Entonces sí, en efecto, se casó con Virginia Clem, 13 añitos, y se le murió de tuberculosis, que era la enfermedad de moda. Todo el mundo.
¿Qué edad se murió la chica?
Virginia Clem, ¿qué habrá durado? No más de 2 años. La chica debe haber muerto a los 15. No más de 2 años, calculo. Eso se puede chequear. Pero sí, no le duró mucho. Pero la amó profundamentísimo. Profundamente. Y de ahí vienen todos sus poemas de amor, a amadas perdidas o lejanas o enterradas vivas o todo tipo de cosas, ¿verdad?
24 años.
24 años tenía.
Virginia Elisa Clement, la esposa de Allan Poe, murió a los 24 años.
Bueno.
El 30 de enero del 847.
847. Bueno, la disfrutó un poquito más de lo que creíamos. Pero el hecho es esto. Tan pronto muere Virginia Clem, Edgar Allan Poe es hombre muerto. Si en su esposa no supo cómo sobrevivir, sucumbió al alcohol, al láudano, al opio, al hashish, al absinto, una máquina de la adicción, era su anestesia contra el dolor. Sí, querida amiga.
Otra cuestión que se puede ver bastante en las obras de Edgar Allan Poe es el hecho de que utiliza mucho un recurso del gótico, que es la expresión de las emociones por medio de la piel del físico. Entonces siempre se hace mucha alusión, digamos, a cómo se siente el personaje que se está hablando por medio del ambiente que lo rodea.
Claro, muy bien observado. Gracias, amiga. One thing that's critical in Poe's storytelling, essential, and he's unparalleled in that, was the creation of atmospheres. He was a master in the art of creating atmospheres. With a few words here or there, he already created an atmosphere of foreboding, of menace, of impending doom, of being threatened by something. You get that tremendously in The Fall of the House of Usher, which we will read if God allows it. You know. Sí, la creación de atmósferas. Era un maestro en el arte de crear atmósferas. ¿De qué? Y muy bien, claro. ¿Qué es una historia gótica sin atmósfera? Nada. Una historia gótica tiene que ser una mansión gótica o más o menos gótica, ¿verdad? Rodeada por bosques secos, aislada del resto del mundo, con un mayordomo jorobado que llega con una lámpara y abre la puerta, y a la par hay un lago que es un pantano, una cosa terrible. Todos esos son elementos del gótico. Gothic literature, and Poe is very Gothic. It dwells on atmosphere. The Gothic sensibility perishes without the atmosphere. Sí, amiguita.
Los personajes siempre cargan con algún tipo de maldición, digamos, sea tanto literal como emocional.
Sí.
Por ejemplo, digamos, en Corazón del Ator,
Ajá.
el personaje protagonista carga con la maldición de Hitler. No soporta ver el ojo de
Sí. Padece de una especie de hiperestesia, es decir, de hipersensibilidad mórbida, patológica. De veras, no estoy loco. ¿Por qué decís que estoy loco? ¿Sería un loco capaz de contar una historia con el detalle y la minucia con que voy a hacerlo? ¿Pero por qué decís que estoy loco? Un loco no sería capaz de planear un asesinato con tanto cuidado. ¿Por qué decís que estoy loco? Así comienza lo que is the typical reaction of a crazy person. But wait, I'm not crazy. I'm not crazy. Would a crazy person be able to commit this murder with so much minutia and detailed method as I did it? Well, you see, I'm not crazy. I'm really not crazy. It's almost laughable in a way, you know. It's dark humor. It's black, it's dark humor. Pero gracias, amiga. Muy valiosa contribución. Qué lindo público tenemos. Sigan llegando. No, sigan llevando. Ustedes son un público. Yo he hecho estos cursos 40 veces en mi vida. Y ustedes son un público especial. Usted, amiguita, tiene que venir. Ya sabe. No, me refiero a usted, no se haga la tonta usted. Y a la amiguita también, y a Jimena, y al compañero, y a mi amiga gótica, allá al fondo, y al compañero. A todos ustedes tienen que seguir viniendo. ¿Cómo agarro? Bueno, no, les voy a planear una revenge, como Montresor, para aquellos que no vengan. Hay una película con Vincent Price muy poiana, donde un actor clásico shakespeariano que había hecho Macbeth, Hamlet, King Lear, Romeo, Troilo y Cressida, Tito Andrónico, Julio César, Ricardo III, Enrique, todos los papeles, y los críticos lo habían masacrado siempre. Entonces el actor se retira de las tablas y empieza a matar de las maneras más horribles y imaginables a cada uno de los críticos que lo habían atacado, y los mata siguiendo métodos de lo que se ve en las obras de Shakespeare. Cómo matan a Ricardo III, cómo muere Hamlet, cómo muere Macbeth, cómo muere King Lear. Si les inflige muertes teatrales tomadas de los papeles de Shakespeare que representó. Es divertidísima, es morbosa en extremo, pero me encanta verla porque también yo odio a los críticos. Entonces, todo arte, every artist has to hate critics. You know, we're opposite species in the animal kingdom. Un poquito de música, una piecita, y después pasamos con The Raven y damos.
Not today. We are going to want you to come for more, and so we're going to leave The Raven for a next time, but Jack is going to let us go with a beautiful melody.
Yes, indeed. The only thing is I have nothing as macabre as what I just read. All my music is beautiful. Something that's...
Telltale Heart, entonces, ¿qué puede salir?
No, I do have pieces that are very morbid and very macabre. I have, by Debussy, by Liszt, but I don't have it on my fingers now. Next time we will play it, when we read The Raven. Pero estoy feliz con ustedes, estoy enamorado de ustedes. Realmente, si no vienen, voy a hacerlo del actor shakespeariano y voy a estar infligiendo muertes diferentes. Each one more elaborated and unimaginable than the other. So what can we play? Oh, let's see. Kind of hard. ¿Saben una cosa? La Patriótica costarricense es una pieza que hemos traicionado durante mucho tiempo. La Patriótica no es un bolero lento, ensiropado, cursi, donde todo el mundo llora. Fue escrita como una marcha militar. It is a military march. The Patriótica costarricense is a military march. Then it was degraded into a mazurka, and then finally it was degraded into this syrupy, very corny, over-sentimental, slow tune, that crawls more than flows. It just crawls over the floor. La versión original de la Patriótica era una marcha militar, la compuso don Manuel María Gutiérrez, el que compuso también el himno nacional. Y él era un militar, no era un compositor de boleros, era un militar, y la partitura en forma de marcha militar existe. debemos de exigirle a los directores de bandas municipales y de orquestas que honren la partitura tal cual era, porque la gente ya no sabe cómo sonó originalmente la partitura y cómo la pensó Manuel María Gutiérrez, que fue un gran héroe. Manuel María Gutiérrez fue más héroe que Juan Santamaría, ¿verdad? El Mesón, la batalla del Mesón en Santa Rosa se estaba perdiendo, la estábamos perdiendo. Había que mandar a alguien que cruzara las filas enemigas para traer refuerzos, pero William Walker había apostado tropas de soldados para evitar que nadie saliera justamente a buscar refuerzos. Pero don Juanito Mora le da la instrucción: usted sale, ahí verá, si se muere, se muere. Su deber es traer aquí refuerzos, ve a ver qué haga. Escóndase, haga camufles, haga lo que pueda. Don Manuel María Gutiérrez hizo esto que toma más valor que el acto de Juan Santamaría. Se amarró al lado del caballo, se amarró así colgando de la panza, del costillar del lado del caballo, sin que se viera la cabecita, ni las piernas, ni nada. De alguna manera se amarró y se agarró duro del caballo y lo puso al galope, apostando y rogándole a Dios que los soldados enemigos no estuvieran del lado de él, sino del otro lado. Pues se la jugó. Eso era cara o cruz. Era cara o cruz. Si lo ven, los masacran. Bueno, por dicha no lo vieron y regresó con refuerzos, y ahí las tropas nuestras derrotaron a William Walker. Después lo siguieron a la batalla de Sardinal, se habla poco de esa, y después en Punta Arenas, y luego la batalla de Rivas en Nicaragua, donde viene la gesta de Juan Santamaría. Pero lo de Juan Santamaría fue un acto de impulso, mientras lo de Manuel María Gutiérrez fue, cielo santo, mucho más peligroso, ¿verdad? Y amarrado a un caballo, te imaginas los riesgos ahí de que no llegue uno amarrado a un caballo. ¡Qué bruto! Entonces voy a tocar...
Es que la batalla de Santa Rosa ya no es una conmemoración, es increíble.
No, antes teníamos himnos y todo tipo de cosas.
Sí, es como si fuéramos perdiendo la memoria.
La memoria social y colectiva.
Yo también escuché a un historiador de la UCR explicar que no fue que se ganó porque motivaron a los campesinos y salieron a la calle. Costa Rica tenía
Un super ejército. Teníamos mejor ejército que los Estados Unidos. Teníamos el mejor ejército de la CONCACAF, si hubiera existido la CONCACAF en esa época. Juanito Mora había comprado armas a Francia e Inglaterra, punteras, cañones, ballestas, ametrallas, rifles, mosquetes. Teníamos un súper... No fue un triunfo de unos pobres labriegos que trocaron sus armas. No, estábamos armados hasta los dientes. La gente vive de esas falsas concepciones. Voy a tocar entonces la versión original de la patriótica costarricense. Gracias, muchas gracias. ¿No les parece que es más linda así? Es más linda así porque así fue compuesta. ¿En qué momento eso se convirtió en? ¿En qué momento? ¿En qué momento? Hay que por respeto al compositor, exijamos que se toque la versión original, marcha militar. Amigos, qué alegría verlos. Les tengo tanto cariño. Me siento tan agradecido de que crean que este viejo tiene algo interesante que decir sobre X, B o Z. Entonces lléguense, síganse llegando, please, I beg you. I should not be doing this, but I do it anyways.
Los esperamos el próximo martes con Carmen Lira. Igual vamos a volver posteriormente con Edgar Allan Poe y con otros autores, pero bienvenidos. Y que no sea la primera vez, ya me gusta ver a caras que reconozco. Muchas gracias y buenas noches.
Gracias, amiguitos, gracias mil, gracias mil. Y gracias a Lili, todo esto es gracias a Lili. Aplauso para Lili.